Hello and welcome. In my video today, I'm creating cards that feature letters and scenes within the letters. So my first card, I'm going to be cutting out the letters for the word hello just in white cardstock. And then I'm going to cut them out, the same letters out of various colors. So starting with a light green and then moving to a light aqua and then moving on to a darker sort of teal turquoise color. And then to create my scene, I'm going to line up the letters and using the different dyes. So this is sort of like a grassy hill that I'm using, and I have some mountains, etc. Just gonna line it up and then go ahead and die cut those out of each color of cardstock. So I'm starting with the green hill, and then I will line up the next layer in my scene on the light aqua color. And once I have a good sense of where I'd like that placed, I'll go ahead and tack it down and run it through my die cutting machine. And then finally, I'll be moving on to the last layer, which is just a mountain peak. I'm just trying to find a good positioning for that with the letters stacked next to each other. And once I have all of my pieces cut out, I'm going to start gluing them together. So one suggestion I have is to keep them kind of lined up where they're supposed to go in the order that they're supposed to go in. So it's really easy to just figure out which L it goes on and which part of the H, etc. So it's really easy to glue down. And so I'm just going to repeat that process with all of my letters. And while I was gluing these down, I realized I didn't quite like the lineup that I had, like how they sort of fed into each of the other letters and then how they stacked within that letter on top of each other. So I'm just going ahead and die cutting some additional pieces out to create a better layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish the gluing of each of these pieces together. And off screen, I ended up ink blending on those white letter die cuts that I cut out from the beginning with a dark color to create that darkened sky. And since I want the focus of this card to be the letters themselves, I'm going to have a simple background with this embossing folder that has sort of a mountain kind of peak. And I'm going to go ahead and run that through my embossing machine and glue that onto my card base. And to make sure that the letters are all lined up when I glue them down, I have tacked them onto this Post-it tape so that they're all kind of lined up on that bottom edge and kind of have, eyeballing consistent spacing between each of the letters. The goal being that I'll flip it over and they'll kind of be in the place that I want them to be, and it'll be really, really easy to align them. However, when I flipped it over, it didn't work. They kind of fell off and they didn't really line up well. So I ended up just placing them and gluing them like I would normally, and just kind of taking the time that it takes for the liquid adhesive to dry to maneuver them into place. I'm using my bone folder here just to make sure that they're all kind of lined up on that bottom edge. And this is the finished card. Pretty simple, really focusing on those letters in the center of the card. And for my second card, I'm actually going to use the letters that spell the word hey, so H-E-N-Y. And right now I'm just lining up, trying to get the letters sort of centered because I'm going to create a front panel with the letters cut out in them. So here I'm just trying to line them up. Each of the letters is a certain height, so I've kind of measured that out in the center. And now I'm using some tape to just tack the letters down for when they go through the die cutting machine. And I'm just using these lines to make sure that I line them up straight and they're on the right edge. And once I have those letters in the positions that I want, I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. And once I've done that, I'm going to erase all the lines as best as I can to make sure that they're not visible in the final card. Unlike the first card, we're going to be creating the mountain scene. It's going to set behind those letters. So I'm just cutting out various colors of cardstock in a slightly smaller than the card panel itself, because we're going to cut them and layer them, so it doesn't really matter. They don't have to be the perfect 4¼ by 5½ card size. So I have 3 teal colors that I'm going to be using for the card, and then I'll add an additional color for the sky. So here I'm just trying to line up the letters in the background, trying to make sure that I like where the placement of those mountain peaks are in the letters in the word hay. And I'll just start running each layers through my die cutting machine as I sort of get the positioning that I want right. So I'll cut out, I'll add that sky piece, and then they'll kind of layer together behind the word hay. But first, I'm going to go ahead and add a small sentiment underneath the word hay using a stamp and die. And I'm first lining it up underneath using this transparency sheet to sort of line up exactly where I want the sentiment stamped beneath the word hay, because it's a 2-part sentiment and I want to make sure it's lined up as best as possible. So I'm using that sheet first to line it up, and then removing it and then stamping the final piece there. And then I kind of want the front panel to sort of be set up against, so there's some sort of shadow and depth. So I'm adding these thin strips of adhesive along the edges of my card base so that I'll attach and adhere the panel to those pieces. But to line them up with the letters through the windows that the letters have created, I'm adding liquid adhesive on the back of each colors of cardstock, and then just lining it up with the card base and then placing it down and then making sure it's sort of right in the right position. So now I'm adding the first layer of mountain, so I'm just lining up the card panel with the card base, and once I like the position it's in, I'm lifting that up and sort of pressing down the previous panel. So now I'm doing each layer of this mountain scene, trying to get them in the right position with how I want them to look through those windowed letters. And as you can see, the way I have them laid out is not perfectly square or anything like that. I'm just trying to get the nice visual through those windows. And once I'm satisfied and everything's been glued down, I'm going to remove the adhesive tops to the foam tape and press my panel down. And that is the second card, so slightly different than the first. And for my third and final card, I'm going to be cutting out the word thanks, and I'm using a slightly different style of letter for this card. I'm going to tack all of these letters down, and then I'm going to die cut them and create a window, sort of like the last card. Except for this card, I am going to do sort of both a layering technique and sort of the window technique. So the very top layer is actually going to be right in line with the die cut letters. And it doesn't make sense right now, but it will as I start gluing them together. But basically I've cut out that top layer from the bottom and cut them out of the letters as well as out of the scene shape that I'm using. And then for the remaining layers, I'm just going to cut them out of various colors and start to begin the layered scene. Since this is sort of 2 letters stacked on top of each other, it's going to end up being 6 different colors for the different scenes, plus a 7th color for the sky. So I'm just going to sort of repeat that layering process that I did for the other cards, trying to figure out exactly the layout I want until I have all of the layers cut out of different colors of cardstock. I'm then going to cut out the panel for the background, so it's going to be slightly less than 4¼ by 5½, and I'm just going to glue this directly onto my card panel. And then like every other card, I'm going to start layering up underneath that window, starting with the furthest layer from the front, working my way forward. And I'll end up having to trim some of the pieces off so they don't hang off the edge. They were ended up being larger than I needed them to be. And I'm just going to repeat that process until I have them all layered up at the bottom. And then just trimming off the excess so that you can't see it when the final panel is placed on top. And so in order to glue this down, I'm adding some very tiny foam adhesive pieces to the top part of the card where there's less layers, and then liquid adhesive to the bottom part of the card where there's thicker pieces of cardstock and more layers. So I'm just going to line up my panel over my card base. And then, as I mentioned before, the darkest layer and the layer that's most in front, I'm actually going to inlay them into the bottom 3 letters that I had cut out at the beginning. So it's sort of a window card, but also that top layer is going to be in line with the front panel. And then finally, I'm just going to add the little triangle piece to the A, just using the white cutout to figure out what position to put that in. And that is the third and final card. So a little bit of a both of the first and second card kind of combined. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and check out some of my other videos.